Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Eddy. It's time for another edition of VLGA Connect, brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, our terrific sponsors. And speaking of Hunt and Hunt, Tony Raunic will be here in just a little while to dig into a decision made this week at the City of Yarra about bicycle lanes and vehicular traffic. It's been a very contentious and hotly contested issue. But first up, we're going to dig into the glass recycling issue. We have two Melbourne mayors joining us to talk about the pros and cons of moving to the 4-bin system. That's all ahead on this week's new edition of VLGA Connect. I want to welcome to VLGA Connect now the mayors of Manningham and Merri-bek, Councillor Jim Grivas and Councillor Nat Abboud, to discuss the Victorian government's circular economy policy, which mandates a 4-bin waste system, specifically the introduction of a purple-lidded bin for glass by 2027. Councillor Abboud, firstly, welcome. You're early adopters there in Merri-bek. You've had the system in since 2023.
We sure have. July of 23, we were one of the first councillors to take on the purple glass bin. Yep.
Terrific. And Jim, at Manningham, you're one of a group of 34 who councils, that is, who are saying this mandate to have the purple bin in by next year perhaps needs a rethink. Did you come to that coalition early or late? Has your position been developing on this over time, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And good to be here on your show. So and welcome, Nat. No, good to see you as well, Nat. Look, Chris, we as the councillors of 34 have come together to say, we need to put a pause on this rollout. There's a number of better options in rolling out this system, and it's something that we want to talk to the government about and say, hey, let's cease it for the moment and let's get our data together and get our numbers together.
Okay. So there's been quite a bit of debate, of course, about the cost, the logistics, the local suitabilities, I guess, of this system. Councillor Abboud, you've had it in for a while, as we said. What was the primary reason that you went as an early adopter to this system?
Yeah, well, Merri-bek, it was Moreland at the time, but is fairly heavily engaged with the ideas of sustainability, and that means we sort of consider our waste stream. It's in a way it's sort of driven from the community, and that's not me saying that the 34 councils that are not currently doing it are not considering their waste stream, but I think there was a bit more kind of community pressure on us to get involved, and we did have quite a lot of residents here lobbying for the container deposit scheme at the time.
Right.
And I think that maybe there was a little bit of I don't know, maybe a loss of hope that, if the CDS is never going to happen, because it did take quite a while, what we might do is just get our glass out of the recycling stream in the meantime. And I think that because there was that incentive with the curbside reform support grant, it sort of encouraged us more to get on board.
Yeah. So the state government put some money in to help you make that transition. And I guess the thinking was set you and some others up as early adopters to demonstrate to others what's possible here.
That's right. Yeah.
And you make a really good point. And so where's the assistance for the rest of the councils, and this is the issue that we've got in the cost in rolling out this system. Are the other councils going to get assistance? Probably not. So then we have to look at from our perspective, and at 34 councils who are on board, and also the other councils who haven't yet got on board or I'm not sure whether they're going to get on board or not, is what's going to be the cost.
Yeah.
So the cost bearing back on the residents, for the 34 councils, we know it's going to be 150 million just to implement, and that's going to come back to the resident. But in saying that, yes, we all want to have a great sustainable recycling program. That's what we're all about here at council. We want to make sure we do the right thing, but not to the cost of the resident. And I think that's a big key here.
I think the other thing that I'm hearing from other councils who are sort of holding fire on this is a bit of advocacy to extend the container deposit scheme into glass. And I was at something, and Carly Moore, the mayor of Hume, was there, and she did mention that idea as well, which Merri-bek absolutely do support that. And she was saying she puts the occasional bottle of wine and a couple of sauce jars in. Well, I don't drink, and all my jars end up full of jam. So we
Yeah, and
we
that's a
did
really
sort
good
of
point.
joke that it
Yeah,
took about a year for us to fill our purple bin the first time we put it out.
yeah.
We just don't use a lot of glass, which, I mean, potentially if the container deposit scheme was extended to include wine bottles and that sort of thing, that would really make I mean, the CDS is fantastic. We're very supportive
Yeah.
of the CDS.
Yeah, look, we enjoy the CDS here at Manningham as well, and it's something that we really want to work on, and we'd like to see expanded, and so do the other 34 councils. In saying that, speaking of Hume, we know they've written to the minister, said no, we don't support this this new glass purple bin. So that's basically Hume coming out and saying that, and Whitehorse, they've also come out twice and said no, we're not going to support it. The impacts of it is that okay, it's collected once a month. We know that it's not a weekly service or a monthly service, sorry, or fortnightly service. It's a monthly service, and I think that's the key out of all this. Is it bang for your buck? And you're right. That let's expand this CDS. The CDS is working really well. There's an opportunity to expand on the barcodes on those bottles, on the glass bottles, whatever glass bottles they are, respective of whether the jam bottles or whatever bottles use. If they can pick up that barcode, fantastic. There's the extension of it. But I think what we need to do with the government, and we've got 3 ministers who basically we need to contact and advocate to. Of course, we've got the Environment Minister Enver Erdogan. So we'll reach out to him, and we've reached out to him a number of times, which is important. We're still waiting for some responses from him. The local government minister, Paul Hammer, who's just got into his role. So we'll reach out to him now and really work with him. But the other one is the cost of living minister. Where's Paul Ledbrook? He's really important now to help us hone in on the costs for implementing this scheme and what it's going to cost each council. And I can give you our numbers. So our numbers from Manningham will be 4.3 million just to implement this service. I'm not sure what it was for your council, Matt.
Well, our ratepayers right now pay less than $18 a year for the recycling bin. So
and that's an average cost, is it?
Yeah, and that's low. Like when you consider that's $18 for the year, and it's because we got in early, and so you have a legitimate point to make about the cost of the whole thing. Our concern, I'm interested to hear about contamination rates and that sort of thing, because
absolutely
for us, the contamination was a big deal for us. So even though we're not picking up a whole ton of glass, it is making a difference to the recycling waste stream because the glass is not in it. Because the problem with glass is it just smashes through everything else as well.
Yeah, can we just expand on that a bit, please, Councillor Abboud? Because that is one of the main arguments, isn't it? That the glass often breaks and embeds in paper and cardboard, ruins their recyclability.
Yeah.
What data have you got to show how that's been impacted by you having the 4-bin system there?
Yeah, well, our contamination rates are now as low as 2%. Is the data that's been given to me. So and that's pretty significant. Let me just see if I can find out what it was, but I don't know what it was, but I know that it was much higher than 2%.
Yeah.
And
while you're doing that, Nat, we'd like the government also to show us what are the benefits, what are the economic benefits in rolling out this bin system, and what are the environmental benefits in rolling out this system. And that's something we haven't been able to get from the government. And I think it's really important that all councils get this information prior to actually making decisions as well. But some councils are just going to go ahead and make those decisions irrespective of getting that information.
Yeah, well, I think part of the environmental benefits are just that pulling the glass out means it can be recycled. And, glass can just be recycled over and over and over again. It's like sand once it, But we've picked up 2,200 tons of glass since we started, which is a significant amount of glass that's gone back in to be more glass, So, and having said all this, Jim, like I'm not criticizing the councils that are in the position that you guys are in, or Hume or others of the 34. And I know that number's growing because it was 29 about a week or two ago.
That's right.
And that's completely legitimate. We're all just doing what we can to try and work out the best situation with our waste streams.
Of course.
But I know that just the benefit of us getting on board really early it can't really be understated, because the grant that we got was 1,189,876 dollars, which is pretty significant.
It is significant, and that helped you implement the service, I'm assuming.
Yeah, but the
Yep.
thing is that
Yep.
there's no way that the government's got a spare $34 million laying around to give
Correct.
all of those councils still hanging in
Yeah,
there.
correct.
You
Yeah,
know,
and that's also on top of the other, if you look at the whole holistic approach, I think there's 5 councils who have implemented the service. So, out of the 79 and another, 75 councils, where they're going to find the extra 75 million to support.
yeah, and it's
they're
about the
not-
footprint as well, right? Because we've got a much smaller footprint. You're talking about from, Bulleen out to Wonga Park. It's
Yeah, correct.
significant,
Which is a
yeah?
bigger footprint. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the cost on us is around about, I think it's around about $27 to $35 on average, depending on where you live. So that's a big increase in their rates.
Yeah, and it refers back to that stuff that you're saying about cost of living and, the price of diesel and this, that, and the other.
And the fact also that the coalition is talking about the one-size-fits-all approach, the coalition of councils, not being the right way to go here.
No.
Can we talk a bit about the practicalities, Nat, the addition of the bin, the physical elements of households managing that extra bin? Because I know that's one of the concerns the 34 council group has talked about. How have you experienced that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because when you're like, South of Bell Street here has been crowded for a very long time, and I think we're just quite used to it. We've got roads that are slow literally because there's so many cars parked on them. You have to kind of meander in and out. It's a really interesting thing, because I think that we've just become quite used to that crowded scenario. And so what we do is the purple bin is monthly and the recycling is fortnightly. So we never have all 4 bins out on the street at the same time, because we do food and green organics as well, which is sort of cut our red bin in about, I think down by 41% or something. It's not quite half, but it's much lower than it was. But we're constantly trying to tweak what our bin schedule looks like. And ultimately what would be awesome, although I don't know when that's going to happen, because now it doesn't really seem like it's the time, although it hasn't been resolved by council. We would like to have the green bin go out weekly, the red bin go out fortnightly, and the recycling fortnightly, and then the purple bin monthly. So we're constantly reworking that. But I think that, and this was sort of mentioned last night as well, because I ran into Carly at the making a submission to the waste to energy conversation, which is pretty, it's a pertinent thing right now as well. But I think that the main thing is just that at the beginning, when we're creating the waste, that's the real situation that we need to be addressing, I think, so that there's less rubbish coming through that we're dealing with.
Have you had any feedback, though, from households that struggle to find space for 4 bins? That's one of the arguments, particularly some of that more inner city living, I guess, with apartments and...
Yeah, not so much. Mostly just because of the way we schedule the pickups. We never have 4 bins out on the street at one time.
No, but I'm talking about having the 4 bins on the,
stored,
on the property. Yeah,
sure.
Not an issue?
There has been some mention of that stuff, but I mean, it's like anything. You just find a solution, don't you, really?
Yeah. So, Jim, is that one of your concerns?
Well, that is a major concern for all our cohort, is where we're going to put these extra bins. So, and, we've got so many suburbs that are coming on board. We've got Merri-bek City Council coming aboard, City of Greater Geelong coming aboard, Campaspe, Shire Council, and Knox, of course. So where are people going to put this 4th bin? And because it's being collected once a month, where are they going to place it? And the key here is, from that perspective, is with this 4th bin, is we're paying for something now that we now have to pay to sort our own glass. That's the other aspect of all this. So yes, I understand, the extra bin. People are screaming about it. We've got 9,000 people who have responded to the survey, and 86% of those said we don't want the new bin. We don't want it. And 91% said expanded container deposit scheme. So yes, there is an issue with putting the bins, especially when you have a lot of units and apartments, those that do have their bins. You're going to have 15 to 30 purple bins now on top of the collection.
Do you have any people in Manningham who are supportive from an environmental perspective of the purple bins, because I think that's really what drove us at the beginning, is our community was, keen to, like our community here did understand the importance, and I don't mean everyone, there's always people that, but it did understand the importance of taking responsibility for our own rubbish a bit more, and understanding that, for somebody who's at a facility like Visy or something, sorting a conveyor belt of broken glass out of plastic and everything else, and contamination, all that sort of stuff. It's not.
And that's a good point. And our residents here are very, very strong on the advocacy on recycling, and that's what we're doing, and that's why we have the yellow bin. Now, who are we actually sorting this glass for then, if that's the case? Is it for us? Well, we're paying for it. We're being asked to pay for something, to resort something for, if we go back to Visy and say, well, we're sorting it for Visy. Is that the case? I don't know. But the government's actually asking us to do something that our residents don't want. And a lot of them don't want. But yes, they do want to recycle as much as possible. And we want to do that. I love doing it. We've got our FOGO, which we love doing, and separating and putting into our green waste, so that we can, have less in our red bin. And that's what this is all about.
And I think
what can do, how can do best.
And your comment about the food and green organics, it's not even to have less in, like, it's not just to have less in the red bin, because it's actually a resource that's worth capturing to put back into soil and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's being done really well at the moment with the yellow bin. So all our glass goes into the yellow bin. It goes back to the entities that look after our recycling. In this case, for us, it's Visy, and they do a great job of separating it. So from that perspective, why are we separating it, again, and actually having to pay for it for a service that we're already getting? The last thing we also want is, more trucks on the road, more confusion, more contamination, more emissions, and of course, more bins. It's the last thing we want.
Councillor Abboud, can I ask you, given you've had this for a while, assuming nothing does change and this campaign is unsuccessful, what's your advice in terms of the community education aspect of this change? What did you learn along the way that others might benefit from?
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because I think that some of the waste levy could be used about educating people about our rubbish in a million different ways. Some of the really pertinent conversations I had just involved talking to people about, I guess, how rubbish is treated in other places, like other countries across the world, because I think that already we do very well, but we can be more engaged than we are with our rubbish. And, remember when soft plastics was a thing that everybody was taking out of their red bins and dropping off back at the supermarket and that sort of thing as well. But I think that the most valuable thing that we've done is just talking to people about using the actual purple bin and making sure that you're not just still chucking everything in the yellow bin. And our contamination rates have halved since we started, which is pretty impressive. So we have quite a low contamination rate now in the yellow bin of glass, which is important. But I think it's just helping people understand that quite a lot of stuff that we throw out is actually a resource that we can use. And the food and green organics is the obvious example, but glass is one as well. And, it's just keeping it sorted at as you put it in the bin really does help.
Nat, can I ask, now, your council actually runs their own collection services, is that right?
We have the best of both worlds, Jim. So south of Bell Street is collected by Citywide, that's now been bought by Cleanaway, and north of Bell Street is in-house.
Okay. And I think, so when you say that, so in-house in regards to collecting your recycling, and that's probably where you're getting your stats from in regards to you actually knowing what your stats are, as opposed to, from our perspective, is, we need to go back, because ours is contracted out fully.
Okay.
So we need to go back and try and find, what are the contamination numbers? And we probably won't get those because we won't know. Our contractor, gets a number of councils that comes in and drops off. So we won't know those numbers specifically.
Yeah, well, we're just about to renew it's on the next council agenda, I think, or the one after, but we're about to renew the South contract. And I think that, one good way to consider, not to tell you how to suck eggs, Jim, but would be maybe build that into the contract. Ask the contractor for some data back so that you can, because we're doing a lot of stuff about, looking at biofuel, and because we really need to consider that a couple of things. One is that we're not quite ready with the tech for hydrogen trucks. It's important to acknowledge, but also diesel is it's too much of a fragile, insecure kind of economy. If we run out of diesel, that has massive implications
Massive
for
impacts right through the
everybody from
whole
producers
the whole
to
sector. Yeah.
and
Good
so
point. Yeah.
we're trying to consider that in our tenders and in our contracts with the people who supply our rubbish pickup, so that we can.
Councillor Grivas, if I can ask you, I think you said earlier you don't believe the state's done enough to sell the need for this. What more would you like to see provided in terms of data or evidence to justify this change, both to the councils and to their communities?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So, look, we'd like to see the environmental impacts. What are the positive impacts? Well, show us that data. If you've got that data, show us. And the economic impacts, well, we know what they're going to be. So it's an impost again on the resident and an increase in their rates. But show us those numbers and show us that data. It's something that we've been asking for quite a while, and we haven't been able to get. So if we don't know what they're telling us, and they're just saying implement it by 2027, that's all great. But for what reasons? For the extra cost burden on the resident, for the extra cost burden on getting more trucks, getting more emissions, getting more, could there be more confusion? Again, it's show us that information, give us the environmental and economic impacts.
And do you see this being a significant issue in the lead up to the state election? Are you planning to make it one?
No, absolutely. I think we will. If we want our government to listen to the residents, and this is not just Manningham or 34 councils. This is also extending out to the other councils who have not come on board yet, and they're listening and watching too, which is great. And we want to make sure that we do the right thing by the government. Say, let's sit down, let's work through this, let's work it and see what can we do with the container deposit scheme and expand it so that we can have those impacts written down and go through the whole process of what's best for all councils.
It is an interesting idea, Jim, because you're talking about people not needing to be responsible for sorting their own rubbish, but container deposit scheme does have that element of not only are you sorting it, but you're actually taking it back. But in that case, you're getting paid to do
that's
so.
the difference. That's the difference. So in one sense, they're saying to us, bring it to the container deposit scheme and get paid for it. Yeah. But in this instance, they're saying, put it in the purple bin, but you pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
This has been
I'm sure that Merri-bek would support extending the CDS, absolutely.
Yep.
Right. We need to wrap it up.
Resolved to, but I imagine that would be the case. Sorry, Chris.
No, not a problem at all. This has been look. I haven't had to do much. You've had a great conversation going backwards and forwards there, and I think it's been really useful for the audience to hear those different points of view. And it's clear that everyone shares this goal of a circular economy. It's the how that remains the point of friction at this time. So I just want to thank you both. Councillor Abboud from Merri-bek, it's been great to have you on.
Thank you. And I just encourage anyone, Jim and anyone else who's interested, to get in touch if you want data. And I did hear that from, I think it was Whittlesey or Hume, that if we share each other's data about what's been going on, that's really valuable as well. So do reach out if you need to, Jim. And it's great to be on. Thank you, Chris.
Terrific. And Councillor Jim Grivas, Mayor of Manningham, I do apologise. I've been saying your name wrong for ages, but I won't anymore. Thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts too, Jim.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate it. We look forward to everyone getting online and just putting your views forward in whether you want this this additional household purple bin. And we'll call it the purple tax if you want to call it that way. It's another tax. And then also, whether they want to see the container deposit scheme expanded. So get all the residents, get out there, get online and answer those questions. So we're looking forward.
Terrific. Thank you both for your time and your insights. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Nat.
See ya. Thank you. And
Tony Raunic is here now from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Tony, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Chris. Hi, viewers.
This week, we want to talk about a pretty interesting decision and process that played out this week at Yarra City Council on Tuesday night. Now, this meeting went on for some time. Did you sit through the whole thing?
I sat through this component of the meeting dealing with this item, Chris, and including the 90 submissions, 90 verbal submissions that were heard by the council prior to the council actually, deliberating and debating and resolving on this Wellington Street bike lane project,
I'm not
which has
sure I've
been.
seen such an extensive marathon session of public speakers towards one issue.
Yeah, that's right, and I think in the lead up to this resolution or the meeting on Tuesday, the Mayor Stephen Jolly I think made some comments about there was an unprecedented level of community interest in this issue, and he's a person who ought to know, having been a councillor in Yarra, I think for 6 or 7 terms,
Yeah.
and I think he said it's is yet to see another issue that has so engaged the people of Collingwood.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So, in a nutshell, correct me if I'm wrong, this plan that was previously floated, which was all about bike lanes and interaction with the vehicular traffic with some limitations, etc., has now been significantly scaled back as a result of the community consultation. Have I got that right?
That's right, Chris. Absolutely. So there was originally the proposal that council had been consulting on, working up since about 2023, was around basically looking for traffic calming arrangements on Wellington Street, a 1.1 kilometre stretch of Wellington Street from Johnson Street in Collingwood through to Queen's Parade in Clifton Hill. And more recently, the proposals or the options that went out for community consultation were one, to have like a shared zone where cyclists, pedestrians, and motorists, vehicular traffic, as you say, would share a roadway space with a 30 km/h speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
The other option, probably perhaps a little more controversial, was that there be some dedicated bike lanes and then these physical barriers called modal filters. I understand these to be like we often see concrete barriers, but sometimes they're plant boxes and this sort of thing that pedestrians or cyclists can navigate through, but vehicular traffic cannot. That second option would significantly reduce vehicular through traffic, again, reduce traffic speeds, but also significantly reduce the number of on-street car spaces. And went through as I say, a consultation process, lots and lots of community feedback, Chris, and ultimately the council officer's recommendation that was considered by councillors on Tuesday night was for what they called a de-scoped
Right.
project.
Yeah.
So still capital works in the area, but much more scaled down. Minor safety works, repainting bike lanes, upgrading some crossings, and investigating the potential for this 30 km/h speed limit. Now, you go first.
I was just going to say, this particular street, I don't know the area that well. Why this particular street for this sort of treatment in the first place in terms of those proposals? Do you know?
Yeah, well, in fact, this is, I think, the final stage of a gradual upgrade of Wellington Street that council have been conducting over several years. They'd already completed upgrades at some various stages south of Johnson Street, between Victoria Parade and Johnson Street. So this is a major arterial route, both a through route. It services, there is a number of primary schools. Clifton Hill Primary School is one that is in the vicinity, and of course on the side streets there is a lot of residential areas. Collingwood is historically been an industrial area that's become more residential, so it hasn't really had that residential traffic treatment from the start, like say a Carlton or a North Fitzroy might have had.
So the consultation's gone out. This significant package of works has received a lot of attention and a lot of feedback, and it's been on both sides of the argument, hasn't it? There's been supporters and detractors, and they've all been quite vocal about it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So you've basically got you know, uh, groups that are very pro, which are representing particularly cyclists, but also pedestrians. So there's a group called Say Yes to a New Wellington Street. That campaign organizer, Alexandra Lamb, she spoke on Tuesday evening, as did her son, who's one of who attends I think the Clifton Hill Primary School. She was being quoted in the media as saying, you know, that council officers should be embarrassed by this backflip. It's weakness at best, and there's a disconnect between the report and its recommendations.
Right.
But then there's as we often see in controversial issues for council, there's a diametrically opposed lobby group called Oppose Wellington Street Closure. Sebastian Guiney, who also spoke at council's been quoted in the media saying, you know, that it's a very concerning proposition that that you know, those people who agree with him really want to see completely put to bed. They don't want any proposition of future works on Wellington Street that will further restrict on-street parking, through traffic, etc. And much of their concern is that where will the traffic go? Will it move into side streets, residential streets, as opposed to just disappear or go through a different suburb?
Okay, so ultimately the council has gone with the de-scoped proposal. I know you watch. I dipped in and out of it, but it was going on for quite some time. Some observations and thoughts, Tony. How did you think Mayor Stephen Jolly handled the matter? Because often the spotlight's on the mayor and the way they manage a process like this, isn't it?
You know, I thought that he did incredibly well. And I don't know Stephen Jolly personally, but I was really impressed with his comments. His preface, if you like, to the opportunity for a packed gallery to provide individual verbal submissions. I think I said 90 submissions. Like, and I really encourage mayors, even just any councillor who's interested in how do you manage a really difficult situation like this, where there are passionate views on either side, a public meeting, to tune in, to go back to the record and just listen to those quick comments from Councillor Joly. He said, look, I understand that this is a passionate issue. You're all going to get your chance to be heard tonight, but please, no, let's have no heckling, no interjections, no sort of raucous clapping at the end of each speaker. And largely, I've got to say, the gallery largely observed that. And I've got to congratulate the councillors themselves too, who had opposing opinions. This resolution, Chris, was ultimately passed in a, I think it was two councillors voted against only.
Yes.
But all the councillors, I thought, in there were very moderate in their debate and acknowledged the validity of the views of other parties. So that's
so good to hear, though, because so often they go off the rails and people grandstand, and I don't mean just councillors, but people in the gallery, the opportunity to perhaps make it into a more confrontational issue, and this seemed to be handled very well as a casual observer.
Yeah, exactly. And I one of the I think even a mover or a seconder of the motion, if I recall right, the ultimately successful motion was Councillor Mackenzie, and a couple of things that she said that resonated for me, Chris. She said that we can often agree on the problem, but we can't agree on the solution.
Yeah.
And that's here clearly both sides of the argument seem to accept that there's an issue with Wellington Street. There are real, clashes between pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicular traffic. And the other thing she said that resonated for me was, it's good for council to put up bold ideas. This was another one of those bold ideas, but ultimately council has to listen to the people. And the view was that certainly the resounding local view, and there were views put by people from outside, Collingwood and North Fitzroy, but the resounding local view seemed to be the gauge taken, if you like, by the majority of councillors was the resounding local view was in opposition to making it much more difficult for vehicular traffic to navigate these parts of Wellington Street. And Councillor Jolly, what he said in debate was that, there's a contradiction at the heart of this. He says, as Yarra grows, we need to share more. And he felt that the project was more targeted towards cyclists rather than kind of sharing the needs of motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists. Now, that's just an opinion. And I'm, as you know, I'm a daily cyclist in the vicinity myself. But aren't these traffic calming issues always controversial, Chris?
Well, they are, and I guess I'm interested to hear you just briefly before we wrap up talk about what you think are the lessons, I guess, for other councils here. There, but for the grace of God, go I. What do you think we take away from this process?
Yeah. Look. Firstly, I think I wouldn't want to beat Yarra Council up about the fact that there was community angst. I think that there was lots of community engagement. But that being said, a number of councillors commented that it was a learning exercise for them, and council can do better engagement going forwards, having learnt some lessons from this. But I think lessons for other councils would be inevitably at your council there will be highly controversial topics like this. There might be local laws changes, there might be a planning issue, there might be a sale of a parcel of land, etc. And with heated and strong views on either side. And I think that councillors really play a role in the tone that those opinions are expressed, particularly the leaders of the council. And I think in this instance, the councillors who spoke both for and against the thrust of the project, both, they all use very moderate language. And I think the community seemed to adopt that approach, certainly in the face-to-face communications with councillors. So, we as the leaders can often set the tone of debate here.
Yeah. And as you've noted, pretty unprecedented of the level of engagement here, and complicated by some media reporting that wasn't necessarily 100% accurate, which is often the case, and that's another learning experience as well, how to deal with that, because you can't control how things get presented so much in those other forums.
Yeah, I mean, if you just, in a cursory way, really read some of the daily newspaper reports on this, and it has got significant press, you'd think that perhaps the council were proposing to completely close a part of Wellington Street off to vehicular traffic. That was never the case. It certainly there would be significant restrictions on vehicular traffic with at least one of the options, slowing it down significantly, narrowing lanes, making it a less attractive route, but vehicles could still get through. But and this is this concern around these, I think they're called these modal,
filters.
What did we call
Modal filters.
Modal filters.
Yes,
that's
yes,
right.
it was a new one on me too, Tony.
Yeah. I think the officer report went into some detail on just what modal filters are and what in fact they do.
All right, that's great analysis. Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate that. As we say, a bit of an unprecedented one there, dealt with very well by Yarra City Council, by all involved, including the community that had their say on Tuesday night. Thank you for that. Now, next week you're coming back and we're going to look at a decision taken recently at Port Phillip, which ties into a pretty hot issue across the sector at the moment, the issue of homelessness. Look forward to having you back to talk about that.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Thank you. Tony Raunic there from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And that brings us to an end of another edition of VLGA Connect. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss future episodes of VLGA Connect. The program is also available as an audio podcast, and you'll find it on all of the major podcast platforms. Until next week, thanks for watching and listening, and bye for now.